if I know how to do math right, which I don't.
Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen eventually, but when I'm sharing my screen, I can't see the chat. So someone will have to look at the chat and tell me if I've missed anything because of how Zoom works. I haven't figured out how to get around that yet. I'm gonna post a bunch of things in the chat. I'm Laura. Hi, everyone. I don't live in South Park, but I have been pestering Robin for some time about wanting to talk about the work that I do in South Park. The first time that I walked through South Park was about 6 years ago with someone kind of, showing me what was what in the neighborhood. That was when the neighborhood was under study for big changes around land use. And I kind of wanted to understand, how the community felt about it. I was one of 600 people that were picked to be volunteer focus group members on the Housing Affordability and Livability Agenda focus group. I was part of the People's Academy for Community Engagement program with the Department of Neighborhoods, and I was just kind of like listening, like different parts of the community. At the time, I was a renter in the U District, and hadn't really spent a lot of time in South Park. Since then, I've spent a lot of time there. One of the volunteers in my organization did a video with Duwamish Valley Safe Streets about the Georgetown to South Park Trail. Through something else I was doing that I was volunteering, I got to know Frank and the other folks, and Maria and the other folks at Duwamish Valley Affordable Housing Coalition, and got to attend a bunch of those meetings. And so, yeah, I've kind of been like keeping watching what's going on in South Park, because I feel like it's a really good example of when development pressure creates kind of a lot of conflict and a lot of like tension in a community, and kind of watching how that's getting resolved and seeing, the shift in the way things are being addressed over the last 6-7 years has been really interesting. So anyway, there's this thing happening right now. It's called the Comprehensive Plan. It's similar, but not the same thing as that HALA upzone process that happened last time. It's different this time. We're in the first step of it. And while I'm talking, if you're a multitasker, you can log into the Engage portal and read what other people have posted. Your neighbors or folks across the city have put comments up. Some organizations have put comments up. Real Change is a really great comment up from their vendors and other community members. So that's been exciting to see. Neighborhood associations have been posting. There's one from Queen Anne Community Council that I have some feelings about that I won't get into. So I will share my presentation. And yes, the presentation should be viewable by anyone. This is I'm going to share the right thing. Okay, so I'm here to talk about tree canopy and the comprehensive plan. And one of the reasons I'm focusing on tree canopy is that different parts of our city have different tree canopies. And a lot of that has to do with whether it's like industrial land or whether it's like a bunch of like rich, wealthy people, et cetera, et cetera. There's like a lot of different factors about tree canopy, but tree canopy is really important for mental health, for keeping cool on hot days, for the heat island effect. And just in general, it helps with mental health outcomes and all sorts of things. And I used to be a middle school teacher and a science teacher, and I love trees. On the left, I have an image here, if you can't see, of the city from like the sky. And on the right, I have a tree that's like a cartoon tree with a word cloud that has different words in it, like One Seattle, which is what Bruce Harrell is calling the comprehensive plan. 15-minute city, which is Councilmember Morales talks about that a lot. And Councilmember Morales has this great framing called Seattle Within Reach to talk about this plan. And then a bunch of different kind of identities like renters and homeowners and residents with disabilities and pedestrians and transit riders, Black, Indigenous, and other communities of color, immigrants, youth, and housed folks, right? All the people, sure, I'm leaving someone out. I'm a queer renter, a musician. I have a lot of identities. I was born in Bogota, Colombia. I became a citizen when I was 5. I embody a lot of different experiences and experience Seattle in different ways. I don't like Bruce Harrell's framing of one Seattle. I think we're many Seattles. I experience different Seattles every day. I show up differently in different spaces. And so I prefer Tammy Morales' framing, which is the Seattle within reach framing, to talk about what we're trying to do here, which is to make Seattle more within reach. And if is there anything in the chat I'm missing? Yeah. Tree coverage in South Park is not great. So I started an organization, Share the City's Community Education, and I'm actually going to be winding that down soon. So this is going to be one of my last things that I do, but it's important. A little bit about me. I'm a renter in 98119. There's an advocacy side. I'm here today with the education side. It's a little bit about me. I have a plant biology degree and did some restoration work and worked as a horticulture worker. And I think all that stuff makes me love trees because I have planted many trees in my life. It's a lot of work. Yeah, so one of the things I'm going to go over today are tree people you should know. So there's 2 tree people that I've been teaching me about Seattle's tree issues that you should talk to and reach out to as a resource. One of the things I love doing is connecting people to each other that don't know each other. That's my favorite part of like this job I've made for myself. And then we're going to have hopefully time for Q&A. So as I posted in the chat, there's the engage.oneseattleplan.com, and you have to create an account. You can do it through setting up an email. Some people are worried about privacy. You can set up a separate email just for this engagement hub, and you will keep getting updates throughout the whole 2-year process. So once you're in this engagement hub, there's going to be like constant like reminders and updates from the city about like, hey, it's time to comment again, or hey, it's time to watch this video. So you might kind of get annoyed with the notifications if it's in your regular email. The shaping the plan phase that we're in now ends on the 22nd of August. That was an extension that 200 of us got. We wrote in and made a lot of noise. It was supposed to end on July 25th. So we got it extended, which was great. And then some of my volunteers made a comment generator. If folks are getting stuck and they don't know what to say, some folks made something called alternative6.org to help people come up with ideas. This is the timeline for the EIS. So we're in summer of 2022. It was supposed to be a 30-day scoping comment phase. They extended it to 60 days, which is still not a lot. This stage sets the ceiling for the amount of growth we can consider. So the maximum kind of amount of new neighbors we can welcome to the city. The next time that will be available for comment will be even more important than right now. There'll be a 45-day comment period in spring of 2023. And so community organizations should be getting ready, knowing that's coming, and hosting workshops during that 45-day comment period. So if you're setting your like budget or your agenda for SPNA for the next year, you might want to kind of earmark something for spring of 2023, like have an event where you're getting people to comment on the draft environmental impact statement, because that'll be the next kind of big future planning document to comment on. And that EIS, for the draft EIS, is in some ways much more important than the scoping phase we're in right now. And then all the way in fall of 2024, whoever is our land use chair, right now it's Council Member Dan Strauss is the land use chair, but we don't know who it's going to be in 2024. So basically the mayor's in charge of this all the way until fall of 2024. And then the city council will make land use decisions and make laws based on these state mandated environmental studies. So it's going to be study, and then the land use laws won't happen and the zoning changes won't happen until fall of 2024. So there's going to be a lot happening in the next 2 years. So this is just the beginning. So don't feel like you're missing out on anything yet. One of my volunteers, Francesca Oaksford, is the illustrator. This is her version of her vision. She drew 12 plexes and rooftop farms. So there's like a 4-story building, a 3-story building, and a lot of plants and rooftop gardens. And a 12-plex just means like housing for 12 people or 12 families in a building. So it could be different shapes and sizes. I think the biggest thing, people have been asking me is, so how big are the rezones going to be? And I'm like, well, it depends who we elect. And it depends, on where the mayor is feeling. Yes, rewild the city. I just saw your comment. I figured out how to, after 2 years, I figured out how to read comments while I'm presenting. But yeah, rewild the city is a beautiful idea. I love the idea of daylighting creeks and planting native species and getting rid of lawns, and all of that stuff is really powerful for our bees and our birds and for ourselves. This EIS process for the comprehensive plan is different than transportation. So this is just land use. So this is just where offices can go, where neighborhood corner stores can go, where things like that can go. This doesn't have anything to do with our roads. So there's a separate process happening at the same time, just to make our lives really, really annoying right now. This is so annoying for me, but there's this whole separate engagement hub and process for the transportation plan happening in a separate department. And the transportation plan and the land use plan, because of the way our city government is compared to other places, they don't talk to each other that well. So even right now, they're having trouble coordinating these two plans, even though transportation and housing are like peanut butter and jelly. Like we should just have one big plan, not two separate plans. But here we are. The Seattle Transportation Plan online engagement hub page is much better than the comp plan page. It's really clear, like what languages they have. Right on the page, it shows really easily the different languages and things like that. So, if it was a contest, they're doing a better job in terms of language access. So what is a comp plan? If you've never heard of a comp plan before, it's a statement of our values about how we use our land. It's a 20-year document that's required by the state. It's under the state's Growth Management Act, and it's a mayoral directed effort. It's not a council-led effort. So Bruce Harrell's the boss, and the city planning department, he tells them what to do and what to study. And the legislators will then use this big 900-page document to create the land use changes that, you'll hear people talk about them as like rezones or upzones or, those kinds of words. But it has to do with how many kind of more people we can fit in our city. So again, register on the engagement hub. I'm just going to say that over and over again until all of you are like, fine, I guess I'm going to do it. I recommend signing up with a unique email so your regular email isn't kind of flooded with a bunch of stuff. We're in the shaping the plan phase or the scoping phase. I'm going to skip over this, but it's important to think about why would someone not want rezones. There's a lot of reasons why, and you can see kind of the testimony back from 2016, some of the reasons why people didn't want changes to their neighborhood back then. I think it's really important to understand and not make assumptions. There's a lot of different reasons why people are afraid of big zoning changes and land use changes. There's a lot of harm that's been done by development in communities across the country for years. There's a lot of mistrust of government, and as all of you know, fighting for the things like the plaza and Duwamish Valley Affordable Housing Coalition, fighting for the three-legged stool of stability, preservation, and I think I've heard Maria say gentrification without displacement, which is a kind of a controversial way to put it, but this is a very, very hot topic, and there's a lot of emotions that come when we're talking about like our homes and our housing. It's a basic like emotional space that we exist in when we're talking about these things. So one of the things I like to highlight is what's working. So I had nothing to do with this. I'm not taking credit for this work. Other people that are like my heroes and sheroes and all the people that I look up to are working on this Youth Achievement Center. It's part of the Equitable Development Initiative. I feel like when we're looking at like the future of Seattle and where do we want to go for the next 20 years, we should look at like, well, what's working right now? So if you need kind of like a case study to dig into what's working right now, I would check out this. What is the Equitable Development Initiative? What is the Youth Achievement Center? Why is it so amazing? I really want to focus real quick on who are all the organizations getting EDI funding, Equitable Development Initiative funding, because these are the people you should be listening to. You shouldn't be listening to Laura or Share the Cities or Queen Anne Community Council, you should be listening to these folks that are getting the EDI funding, like, Daybreak Star, Black and Tan Hall, Big City Collective, Duwamish Valley Affordable Housing Coalition, The Longhouse, Ethiopian Village, Clear the Land, Rainier Beach Food Innovation District. Like, what do these folks want the future of the community to look like? And really kind of listen to them in terms of what is community-led development? What is equitable development? How can we get more of it? Where can we build it right now? Where is it illegal? A lot of these buildings that people want to build are 20, 30, 40 units of housing. Most of Seattle, that's illegal. So 70.8% of Seattle, you can only build a new $700 to $2 million McMansion, right? Like, that's all you can build. That's all that's legal on that lot. So folks that want rezones, that doesn't necessarily mean that what gets built is going to be affordable. There has to be concurrent policies that keep new multifamily housing affordable. But right now, 70% of the city, you can only build a new single family home. And a lot of times it's little cute bungalows that are getting bulldozed, and there's a lot line to lot line, McMansion getting built. And this leads into the trees. I'm sure all of you are like, when is she going to talk about trees? So these are some more organizations that you should know about. I took the time and I made hyperlinks for every single one of these organizations. So hopefully when it's not 100 degrees out and it's not 8 o'clock at night, you can sit with my PowerPoint and go through and kind of like dig through each of these rad organizations, because I love all of them. Some of the daydreams my volunteers have are Barcelona Superblocks as kind of a big daydream, which is basically housing and shops and daycare around the outside, and then the inside is car free. And you have, people that can like go to the pharmacy, and their kids are playing in the courtyard and picking up their kid from daycare and stopping at the corner store, and then they just live upstairs. And instead of a 15-minute city, it's really like a 5-minute city concept. Another daydream that some of you might have heard of is the House Our Neighbors initiative. It's Seattle Social Housing, I-135. There's been signature gatherers and a lot of conversation around that. Here are some examples of what social housing looks like in different parts of the world. Social housing is usually multifamily, 40, 50, 60, 100 units of housing. The parts of Seattle where you're legally allowed to build structures that look like this, very, very few, maybe like 20% of Seattle, you can actually build some stuff of this scale. So it's pretty much illegal in most of Seattle. So when we talk about Seattle social housing, we're not talking about 3 units or 6 units. We're talking about 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 units of housing. Right now, the city has paid these organizations to do outreach. So Duwamish Valley Sustainability Association is getting money to do outreach for the comp plan. Estelida's Library, Khmer Community, We Become Sea Potential, Capital Eco District, and Asian Pacific American Labor Alliance. So these organizations are getting funding to do deep work, like in language and culturally appropriate work in the community. So please connect with them. They're the experts on the outreach, not me. The last thing I want to say is when we talk about rezones, we can be very worried legitimately about gentrification. There's a report that makes some really fantastic recommendations of what we need to do alongside, to prevent gentrification. The Rainier Beach Action Coalition, Multicultural Community Coalition, and Puget Sound Sage wrote this amazing report. I had nothing to do with it. I'm just here saying, please read it. And then there's videos to watch from Councilmember Morales with the Seattle Within Reach framing around the comprehensive plan. That is really fantastic series of videos. I think she's done 4 2 to 3 hour panel discussions where she does like a deep dive on like what is a 15-minute city, or how do we make sure small businesses are thriving in the next 20 years. And she's really doing amazing work. Okay, I'm going to take a break there before we talk about trees. Does anyone have any questions? Fern.
I have a few. I think where my concerns are is a the power being in the mayor's hands. That seems absurd to me. It's like how, and you're talking about like how we can get it into the community's hands. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, like those community partner orgs that are funded by the city is, I think they got like maybe $300,000-$400,000 or maybe 250 in the budget for community organizations to like be like stewards of this comprehensive plan process. And so I'm trying to get more people to know that so that they get connected to those organizations, because what those organizations weigh in on and say the future should be is going to have a really, in a good way, outsized influence on the process. So if those community partners that the city has designated as like the main community partners go to the mayor and say, hey, this is what we're hearing, it's going to have a lot of weight. So that's kind of the funnel. In addition to using the engagement hub, you should also be funneling your dreams and thoughts and hopes and concerns to those community partners if you're, in community with those organizations.
And then is there like do those organizations come together to make decisions, or are they making decisions separately?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to.
Yeah, I think that there's just a lot of fracturing in it. Like it just seems like there's not much cohesiveness, where I know the community is like a big word people use.
Yeah.
When it doesn't mean anything in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Like, what is community if it isn't together? If it's separated, it means nothing. I'm worried about it. Like,
sure,
that it's kind of the word is being appropriated in
sure,
some ways.
Sure. That's great feedback. Yeah, absolutely. Like, one of the things I work so hard to do is make sure that like people in different parts of Seattle are listening to each other. Like, I'd say most of the work I do is in districts 4 and 5, and making sure that people that have long said, no, we're full, like no more room here, like kind of courting the new light rail in Northeast Seattle and like, that kind of stuff, really kind of holding those folks accountable and being like, come on, like enough is enough. Like, you need to like welcome more people. Like, the development pressure on the rest of the city is your fault. And so that's my lane that I've kind of stayed in over the last, 7 years. But I am trying to make sure that other people throughout Seattle get connected with organizations that are on the ground, that are like the land use experts in their communities.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I have a ton more questions, but I'm not going to get to them because.
Okay, well, we can go get ice cream anytime.
But
I like one-on-one, so.
I have a random question,
Yeah.
and maybe you can answer it. So in West Seattle, there's this building, because you were talking about big buildings. There was this building being constructed right next to where I live, and it ended up being too big. And that thing has been abandoned for years now because it was too big. And I'm thinking, there's people without houses everywhere. Like,
yeah,
why is this sitting empty? Like, it's not even completely finished for years, and it's blowing my mind. And I'm just like, why?
Can you email me the address so that I can dig into the history?
Most definitely.
Awesome. Okay, this is the tree part. So urban tree canopy, like I said, it's good for mental health. It's good for the heat island effect, which means that, cities get a lot hotter than that don't have trees versus that do. Like, parts of the city, you could have a 10, 15 degree difference in different parts of the city on a hot day. The people that are like in charge of our urban tree canopy sort of is the Urban Forestry Commission. They're an advisory group. They meet twice a month. They have really great meetings. I've been to a few of them. You can watch their meetings after the fact. You can read their notes. They take really good notes. They have a website. If you Google Urban Forestry Commission, and they have all their materials up there and all the letters they've written to the city. And they're kind of the protectors of our urban tree canopy. There's a presentation from Josh Morris, who's both on the Urban Forestry Commission as well as in this formerly known as Seattle Audubon Society. The Seattle Audubon Society is changing its name because Mr. Audubon was not a great person and was super racist. And so they are taking the Audubon out of their name. So right now they're designating their name as Seattle and then Audubon crossed out Society. So I don't know how to say it, but that's what they're doing right now. So I recommend the Trees and presentation from Josh Morris. I recommend having Josh Morris, like, come and talk to South Park about trees. There's also the Last 6,000, which is on Instagram. They table at farmers markets and they write letters to the city. They do like standouts and protests. So like if, there's a forested hill in West Seattle that they're keeping an eye on right now, that there's some single family development happening on a big, like 4,000, square foot lot, and, dozens of trees will be chopped down. They're the kind of ones that are keeping track of bigger parcels to protect. So Sandy Shetler from Last 6,000 and Josh Morris from Audubon, not Audubon Society, are the people that I go to when I have tree questions. And I wrote an op-ed on Earth Day with Josh and the Stranger that you can read about trees that I am super proud of. So yeah, I recommend them as guests, Sandy and Josh. They're people you should know. Okay, trees. So trees and climate. Some of this will be review for some of you that love trees. Trees and climate are interconnected. One way cities can help trees is by providing human habitation on less land. By conserving undeveloped land while meeting human needs, cities protect agriculture and forests. To do this, we must build up rather than out. So Washington State, unlike other states, has the Growth Management Act, which puts this in the law. So in Washington State, our Growth Management Act says you have to build in cities to protect our forests and our farms. Another way to protect our trees is to have public transportation. That's like a much longer conversation how those dots are connected, but I'm just throwing that out there as something to think about, is that public transportation and trees are connected. We don't often think about that. There's a lot of benefits. Trees collect and store carbon in the city, although only in very small amounts compared to the forests and the wilderness. Trees do provide habitat for insects, birds, and animals, and it's just really important for people to be connected. There's shade, protects us from heat waves. You all know this stuff. There's a thing called a sponge city, basically, which is really important around stormwater infrastructure. We need to have trees as part of water filtration and to keep our salmon healthy. We need to have creeks that are daylit, not just in pipes, with native species around them. Here's a super nerdy picture of the cooling effect of trees. I'm not going to go into this super nerdy thing right now because that turns into a science lecture, but I'm a science nerd. There is some consensus now among even tree advocates in Seattle that we have to build up to save our trees, and that a lot of the deforestation in Seattle is happening in that 70% of land that's dedicated to detached single-family housing, because our protections in those areas aren't great. And so a lot of our tree loss is not happening in the areas where there's apartments. It's actually happening in areas with single-family houses. That was not something that was like widely discussed maybe 6 years ago. Suspended pavement is a super nerdy thing if you want to learn about it, but basically it helps with filtration and retention and water uptake. And, we really want to think of de-paving our city as much as possible. Somebody said use the phrase rewilding. Rewilding is like an extreme version of this, where you really think of the city turning back into, all of the houses that you see, like, I'm in Wallingford a lot, knocking on doors and talking to neighbors there about the historic district they want. And you hear about trees all the time. All of those homes that they consider historic exist because they clear cut Seattle. So they're like one of the first things that happened is Seattle was clear cut. And so, it's the history of trees in Seattle is very complicated. Parking lots, how can we turn some of our parking lots into more forested areas? How can we turn some of our parking spaces into areas with trees? There's a lot of kind of work being done in other countries around this. and some kind of pilot programs. Our new SDOT director that just got, he came from Los Angeles. He did tons of work in Los Angeles around tree canopy and adding tree canopy back to Los Angeles. So we're hoping that this new Department of Transportation director will focus on trees in Seattle as well. So that's kind of exciting. So are folks familiar with green bags? So green bags can save new trees. So when you have a new townhome development come in and they plant those little trees that replace the beautiful trees that you miss, and then you see those trees die in like a year or two, it's probably because no one was taking care of them and there wasn't a green bag and no one was watering them. So green bags are really important. So some people go out, some tree advocates go out and, you know, knock on doors and say, hey, your tree looks really thirsty. I'm going to give you a green bag. I'm going to teach you how to fill it. And please just keep filling that green bag. And that will slowly water the trees over time. And the first 5 years of the tree's life are really critical. So one of the things Dan Strauss has been talking about, the land use chair who oversees all this tree stuff, is figuring out how the city can do a better job making sure that new trees are not just planted kind of like as a box that developers check, but actually like the new trees that are planted, you know, get 5 years of care mandated somehow, like, you know, or there's a urban forester position to make sure that all those new trees get planted. Because Seattle is planting a lot of trees, but not a lot of them are surviving for different reasons. And that's a big problem. Okay, so this rule, I stole this slide from Sandy. I stole a lot of these slides from Sandy and Josh, but the 330-300 rule is that everybody can view 3 trees from every home, that there's 30% tree canopy in every neighborhood, and that everyone is 300 yards from the nearest public park or green space. So that is a rule that people are using not just in Seattle, but across the world as like a standard, because this tree canopy conversation in growing cities is happening all over the world. So that's kind of a standard to go for, is 30%, 300. And recently, I should have included this in the slide, but there is an article about Tacoma's tree canopy and how far behind they are compared to Seattle, and it was really interesting. So why doesn't Seattle have more trees? So trees get removed for solar access, proximity to buildings, maintenance concerns, scraped lot developments, which I know a lot of people get rightly angry about, drought stress, and then pests and ivy. So if you don't remove ivy from trees, that's really bad for older trees. So if you see old trees in your neighborhood, take down, get rid of that ivy. This is Sandy's work with Last 6,000. They go out and they hold signs. I've held signs with them a number of times around Seattle. I highly recommend you do it. They're wonderful people. If you want to go talk about trees with someone. This is a map of Seattle. Seattle's urban forest is mostly on private property. So single family residential zones in Seattle make up 63% of our canopy. Multifamily is only 9%, parks is 20%, and everything else is 8%. So when we talk about rezoning the city, people get really worried about, oh no, the trees are going to come down. But right now, most of the tree removal and most of the tree loss is actually happening in the single family residential zones already. So our tree protections are failing right now. So as we make this comp plan change, we need to also be protecting our trees. Okay, so again, there's the Treesan video from Josh Morris, there's Urban Forestry Commission meetings, and then there's the Last 6,000 on Instagram. Those are some of the places I go to learn about trees. And again, I stole a lot of stuff from Josh and Sandy, and I recommend you reach out to them to learn about tree canopy stuff. And now is the fun, more Q&A. 7:25, I'm doing okay on time.
Yeah, we agreed to extend the time in the chat anyway. We're so ahead of time. There was a question in the chat, it looks like. I don't know if Preston, you want to speak to that, or we can just read it.
Yeah, I can speak to it really quick. So my question was, is the city of Seattle focusing on specific tree species that are like fast growing, drought tolerant, just due to the fact that this region is warming and becoming drier? And if so, can you like name some of those tree species? I'm just curious.
That's a great question. That is the kind of question I asked Josh and Sandy. That is a Josh and Sandy question. So they are much more like every single day they focus on this issue. They're both busy tonight. I invited them both to attend, but so I would say I don't know the species that are being like targeted for the fact that for like climate change mitigation or to account for that, but I believe from people I know that work at SDOT, it is something when SDOT, Seattle Department of Transportation, plants a tree, they are thinking about all those things. They're thinking about, is it on the side of the street with the power lines? Is it a short variety? Is it a tall variety? That they are worried about, and they are planning for, a warming city.
Yeah, and one follow-up question. On Capitol Hill, so the I think it's like the King County Juvenile Justice Department on 12th Ave, I think it is. I don't know if you ever go on that strip toward Yesler and 12th
You're talking about the youth jail?
Yeah. Have you seen the landscaping job? That's the big complaint of mine. It's just like
I haven't been there since I protested it a few years ago. No, I probably should go look at the landscaping again.
It's terrible landscaping. It's just, maybe you could fix that for us.
I think that I reached out to a landscape architect recently and said, let's talk about trees. Because I am looking for like, who are the people that I can trust to recommend other people talk to? Like, that's kind of been the thing that I've been doing over the last 6 years is like, talking to people, having one-on-ones, like, oh, okay, these are the people you should talk to that are coming at this with just a deep, like, kind, compassionate, like, wealth of knowledge. They're not trying to scare people. Like those are the people I've been trying to seek out, right? And I would put Robin in that category. People that I trust, like people that I can go to and go, so what do you think about this, like, right? So yeah, I don't have all the answers. There is a number of tree organizations in Seattle that like I haven't had such a good relationship with, so that was part of why I sought out those two folks as people that I could like talk to and like get advice from, and they are both very approachable. So I will send your emails about them. South Park, we have trees planted in memorial on Donovan Sullivan. They've been pruned in a devastating way as part of the memorial. If you cut them down, leaving the stumps, they grow back into beautiful large trees. That's interesting. I know South Park is actually, I think, trying to, in industrial zones in general, have been deforested extra. So I guess part of the reason I came here tonight, like, was because I wanted to ask all of you, when they're doing these tree changes and it's time for like budgeting, just demand like more than your fair share. Cause like the parts that the Seattle that are like already 30% tree canopy, like the priority should be getting your neighborhood up to 30%, not like helping some like rich people in Laurelhurst keep their 30%. And so I don't know, I guess that's kind of my secret motivation here, is that the people that have like time on their hands to spend 24/7 of their lives fighting for tree canopy are people that have a lot of money and a lot of privilege, and so like just being like, hey, we don't have 30% over here yet, like get us to 30%, right? Like just being really loud about that number, I would say is the most important. It's a simple thing, right? You can just be like, hey, we still don't have 30% trees. Hey, we still don't have 30% trees. Like, hey, like just bugging the city, like till they're like, okay, fine. Like, okay, we'll put you at the top of the list for 30% trees, right? Like just being a pest works so much. Being annoying works. They're just like, oh, how do we get her to go away, right? So, Robin and then Fern.
Thanks. I just wanted to say, in addition to that idea of being a pest about our tree cover, I think my understanding is that the industrial, like in most of the city, if a tree is removed on public land for whatever reason, they have to replace it with 2 trees, but that rule does not exist in the industrial zone. So all of those trees, I mean, not all of those trees, but any trees that are in the industrial area, if whoever owns that property, oh, I guess I just, well, I'm not sure, but the point is that rule should be in the industrial area as well.
I think the most recent Urban Forestry Commission meeting I went to, they were writing a letter to Dan Strauss about the update to the tree canopy, and I think they're asking for a 5-to-1 replacement. So for every tree that gets cut down, the city there would need to be 5 trees planted.
But is the industrial, does that refer to the industrial zone as well?
I'm going to go to Josh Morris and ask that question.
I think that would be important.
That's part of why I came tonight, is to get questions to go back and ask and be like, hey, what are you all doing specifically on industrial zones? Fern?
Yeah, I just want to advocate guerrilla gardening and seed bombs. Seed bombs are basically just seeds that you pack into soil and you throw them, and they land in a place, usually flowers, because a lot of things need to be in the soil, but those are great pollinators. I'm just saying, like, we don't have
I've done that so much. When I moved to Seattle in 2009, one of the first things I did was Alley Cat Acres Urban Farming Collective. And then I know folks that have been part of like the Beacon Food Forest, and like, yeah, seed bombs are great, and it's magical when you like see it actually like growing and you're like, I planted that. So yeah, having like a seed bomb booth at like an event would be a super fun thing to do, and like, yeah, love it. Yeah, I don't think you guys need to have me come in and tell you what to do. I just want you to know who to like talk to if you have questions. Steph and Jess.
Hey, it's me again. I'm very talkative. It's mostly normally Jess. My question too, and it's a couple of things. So I live on 7th, behind Concord, the dead end part of the street, and we have a single family home that is being like wonderfully advertised as a development for upscale townhomes. It's like over $2 million for the development of that land. So I guess kind of my question is, because I've been trying to figure out like what can I do to, number one, like talk to maybe someone from the Duwamish Affordable Housing Group about like, how can we advocate to make sure that there's some affordable housing in there? And also with trees, I guess my question is, what is the policy around like a single home being moved into a townhome as well? Multiple.
Yeah, so like if it's the residential small lot zoning, the RSL zoning, or if it's the low rise 2 or low rise 3, this is where it gets real wonky really fast, and it's all acronym soup. But there's like RSL zoning, which is like some zoning changes, and then low rise zoning, which is where like you can get like, more like 6 townhomes versus like 3 townhomes. The tree protections with that are not great. And so the city has been working for 2 years to update the tree canopy rules. And it should have been finalized already. And Councilmember Dan Strauss is the chair of the land use committee, and he keeps saying like, oh, we're gonna finalize it. And so the people, Sandy especially, in a different capacity that she has with an advocacy organization called Tree Pack, have been in deep conversation and struggles and getting lawyers involved with the city around trees. So I think Sandy would be a good person to agitate and advocate around that. She can like make some noise. So Josh is more of the like phone a friend when you need like what tree to plant, and Sandy's more of the like when you need to like get the tree people fired up about a particular spot, right, to come and hold their signs, right? So that's kind of the people I'm trying to connect you with.
We're past meeting time, so it's like optional if you wanted to hang out. then hang out, I guess. But somebody's got to end the meeting who is operating it. Anyway, yeah, let's be respectful of people's time, though. We could probably talk about all this for days. Thanks, Laura.
I will come down and chat in South Park anytime.
Come
So
to that party.
just, yeah, let me know.
Yeah, you can come to that party if you want to. I think it seems pretty open. Yeah, cool. Bye, everyone.
It was nice meeting all of you.
Our
Thank
next
you.
our next meeting is second Tuesday of next month, and I think
September 13th.
Susan will send out an invite and asking if anyone wants to add things to the agenda on Facebook, I believe is mostly, and then email if you're on the listserv.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.